Brick walls are frustrating. I've broken through dozens, but I have even more that I've been staring at for years. In this quick video, I'll share one method of breaking through a brick wall and provide an illustrative example. Quick version: when you have a bunch of people with the same name living in the same state and you can't figure out which records belong to which person, find all the records, associate them with people based on location, and then consider the reality of distance for the time period. What do I mean by that? Consider colonial Philadelphia and Manhattan, two major cities about 90 miles apart. Today, Amtrak's Acela train can make that trip in about 90 minutes. A car can do it in 2 hours because of traffic. But in colonial times, a horse, or a sailing ship, was the more likely mode of intercity travel. Now, a horse walks at around 4 or 5 miles an hour. Making the journey between New York and Philadelphia take about 20 hours. That's a 2-day trip. And really, 90 miles was a huge deal. Before the automobile, your ancestors' family, friends, associates, and neighbors were probably all within a 2-hour radius. That's about 6 miles on foot and 10 on horse. If you see records for what appear to be the same person in two towns 20 or 30 miles apart at about the same time, you can bet they are actually two different people. Quick example here. This Find a Grave memorial for a Jacob Slough in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Someone fairly recently added a new grave marker saying that Jacob served in the Northampton County militia during the Revolution. Northampton and Montgomery counties are about 50 miles apart. Of course, he could have moved to Montgomery County after the Revolution. There were a couple Jacob Sloughs in Northampton County. In fact, there were quite a lot of Jacob Sloughs in colonial Pennsylvania. And while it seems pretty unlikely that a Jacob Slough who died in Montgomery County served in the Revolution in Northampton County, distance isn't quite enough on its own to resolve this issue. My suggestion here is to take all the records, put them out on a map, and try and associate them with individuals. This is what I did to figure out which Jacob Slough was my wife's ancestor. I started collecting records for anyone with the surname Slough in Pennsylvania who was born before 1800. I didn't care whether a given Jacob Slough was a possible candidate for the man in my wife's tree. I didn't even care if the record was for a Jacob. I wanted to identify as many different families as I could so I could tie it all together and rule the various Jacob Sloughs out by process of elimination. When I got started, this didn't seem like that big of a task, but I ended up reviewing hundreds of resources over 2 years. Once I had all that data, I began to group the records into people based on county and estimated age. And then I put them all on a map to help me visualize what was happening. With that, I started tracing each group of county records, broke them into what I thought were real people, and tried to trace their lives, families, and migrations, winnowing down over 30 distinct clusters of records based on age and location into 20 men named Jacob Slough, born in Pennsylvania before 1800. Via that process, I was able to establish descendants, or a lack thereof, for 14 of those Jacob Sloughs, none of whom could be my wife's ancestor. I knocked another 2 out simply for being the wrong age. That left me only 4 men that could have been my wife's ancestor. One was married to the wrong woman. Another was a boy when his parents moved to North Carolina. It'd just be crazy to think he didn't emigrate with them. That left 2 Jacob Sloughs, one of whom lived in the same township as Elizabeth Morey, the woman who married my wife's Jacob Slough, and another fellow who lived 95 miles to the north of Elizabeth Morey and her family. There's no way that that Jacob Slough knew Elizabeth Morey well enough to marry her. By process of elimination, the only fellow left was recorded in the 1810 US Census, just a few lines away from Elizabeth Morey's parents. More interestingly, he was adjacent to a Bernard Slough, who was old enough to be that Jacob's father. In that broad search, looking at hundreds of records, I found a baptismal record for Elizabeth Morey's youngest brother, where his godparents were named as Bernard and Justina Slough. That baptism occurred on the exact same day and in the exact church that Elizabeth Morey married Jacob Slough. That record tied the lineage all together. I hope you enjoyed this 5-minute genealogy video. If you have any questions or suggestions for future video topics, please leave them in the comments. If you like my channel, please subscribe and give a thumbs up.